Is a 2025 housing market crash coming?
Uh-oh. There's one real estate analyst who says the housing market looks a lot like it did in 2008.
Or will it just boom?
These are the images being shared claiming all these homes are up for sale in the last 14 days in DC.
Or maybe just freeze solid?
The housing market's in a deep freeze when it comes to home sales and origination volume.
Are real estate prices in 2025 going up or down? If you've been wondering, should I buy a house in 2025 or what's next for the US and the UK housing market, then you are in the right place, because in this video we're breaking down the 2025 housing market showdown. Crash, boom, or frozen, explaining what's happening and what it means for you in plain English.
Excuse me, sorry, do you speak English?
No, I don't, sorry.
So stay tuned, because in the next few minutes you will learn the latest on real estate prices in 2025, 3 possible outcomes for home prices, what experts are predicting, and tips for buyers, investors, and renters. This is one you cannot afford to miss. Real quick, if you're new here, my name is Chika and I make these videos to help you understand money the way the rich do, so you can start building your very own version of financial freedom. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, hit that subscribe button, because every Wednesdays and Sundays every week I break down money, financial markets, and how to protect your wealth. Now, let's get into it. Right now, in early 2025, the housing market isn't crashing, but it isn't exactly booming either. Think of it like a game of freeze. In the US housing market 2025, house prices are still near record highs and up a bit, about 2 to 3% compared to last year. Why haven't they fallen more? Well, a big reason is just because there are not enough houses for sale. After the last housing crash in 2008, builders didn't build enough homes. So now there's a shortage of supply, which keeps prices low. Also, many homeowners refinanced or bought when mortgage rates were super low, between 3 to 4%, compared to today's rate of around 6 to 7%. So those owners don't want to sell and give up cheap loans. Fewer people selling means fewer houses in the market, which supports the prices. Overall, in the UK housing market, it's a similar story really. The real estate prices in 2025 in the UK have been pretty flat, even about 1 to 2% growth in the past year. The average UK house costs around £267,500 as of early 2025. Housing are still very expensive relative to salaries, and affordability is a big problem, especially for first-time buyers. Like in the US, the UK also saw high interest rates recently. Mortgage rate rose to about 4 to 5% instead of 2 or less percent that people have really enjoyed before. That means buying a house stays challenging for many. However, on the bright side, inflation is coming down and the economy is so-so, meaning unemployment is fairly low. So we are not in a recession right now. Maybe we are, maybe not. However, sellers in the UK know that the market is softer, so prices aren't soaring, but they are not plummeting either. They are basically in a holding pattern. In fact, one major report portal expects UK house prices to rise only about 2.5% in the whole of 2025, which is a very slow climb. Here's the bottom line. As of 2025, housing in both the US and UK is expensive and moving slowly. High mortgage rates have cooled the frenzy of 2020-2022, but many buyers and sellers are still sitting on the sidelines. It's a stalemate, which sets the stage for our showdown scenario. Will the market crash, boom, or stay frozen? Let's explore each. Now, no one has a crystal ball, but experts says there are 3 main ways the 2025 housing market could play out. Let's break this down. Outcome 1, a crash. What if there is a housing market crash in 2025? A crash means that house prices falls a lot. Think a drop of 10 to 20% or more in value. For a crash to happen, something would have to seriously upset the market. For example, a big recession with lots of job losses could lead to many people defaulting on their mortgage. If many homes hit the market through foreclosures or panic selling, prices could tank. Another trigger might be if mortgage rates shot up even higher than expected, pushing buyers completely out of the market. In a crash scenario, the buyer would finally see lower prices. Good news for those who have been waiting to buy for a long time. They're going to buy at a bargain. But homeowners and sellers would see the equity vanish and might owe more on their house than it's actually worth. This could be painful. Remember 2008? Yeah. So will we see a 2025 housing market crash? Most experts don't think so. Unlike 2008, we don't have a huge glut of houses or risky subprime mortgage loans ready to blow up. Banks have been lending more carefully, and as we mentioned earlier, housing supply is tight. Unless the overall economic outlook changes drastically, a crash is considered unlikely in 2025. One real estate economist even said 2025 will look a lot like 2024, meaning no big collapse on the horizon. Of course, anything is possible. If 2020 has taught us anything, it's to expect surprises. But a full-on crash would probably mean a big economic shock. Outcome 2, a boom. What about a boom? Could real estate prices in 2025 suddenly skyrocket? In a boom, house prices will surge quickly, maybe hitting new records month after month. How could that happen? Well, imagine mortgage rates drop sharply. If, say, inflation falls and central banks cut interest rates, suddenly loans become cheaper. More people could afford to borrow and buy, and demand for houses would jump really. But with the housing supply still limited, that increased demand could create bidding wars and prices will surge really fast. Also, if the economy does amazingly well, that is low unemployment, rising income, more renters might decide to become buyers, fueling a boom. In the UK, for example, if mortgage rates somehow fall back to near 2 to 3%, I know that's very optimistic, and the new government introduced incentives for buyers, remember like those help to buy loans? Well, you could see a mini boom in home sales and prices. However, most analysts see such a boom as unlikely, at least not at the national level. Why? Because even if rates dips, they are not expected to go back to rock bottoms that we've seen in the 2010s. In fact, UK experts says 4% mortgage rate may be the new normal, no more 1%. And in the US, while rates might ease, they probably wouldn't plummet overnight. So without cheap money, it's hard to have those double-digit price booms. So the boom scenario for 2025 might mean more of a mild uptick. For example, the most bullish forecast out there, like some UK real estate agent, predict around a 4% rise in home prices in 2025. That's growth, but not exactly an extreme boom. It's more of a healthy decline. The boom scenario would be great for homeowners who watch their house values rise, but tough for first-time buyers who are trying to get on the property ladder. They're going to see prices run away from them. So keep an eye on interest rates. If the Fed or Bank of England start cutting interest rates faster than expected, well, we could see a bit of a boomlet as more buyers rush in. Outcome 3, frozen, otherwise known as stalemate. The third scenario is what we would call frozen. This is basically a repeat of what we are saying now. The market stays slow and steady without a big jump in price, not up, not downwards. Picture a stalemate. Buyers can't pay more, sellers won't accept less, so prices just hovers in a place or rises only very slowly. Homes still sell, but it's at a trickle. This could happen if mortgage rate stays around the same and the economy plunges along major shocks. In a frozen market, house prices in 2025 might end the year just a few percentage higher or lower than they started. In fact, a recent JP Morgan report expects that the US housing market to remain largely frozen throughout 2025. They project maybe 3% or less price growth for the year. That's basically flat when you factor in inflation. That means on average, houses won't get much cheaper, but they won't get much expensive either. Similarly, in the UK, several forecasts are calling for roughly 0 to 4% price changes, suggesting a pretty tame market. In a frozen scenario, buyers might get frustrated. There is no price crash to give them a big break, but at least prices aren't running away either. You'd expect more time to, shop around and perhaps negotiate a little. Sellers might be equally frustrated because their homes aren't fetching those 2022 price levels and might sit on the market longer until the right price is met. Sales volumes, that is the number of houses sold, could stay low because of the standoff. In fact, it is a cautious market. The Financial Samurai described it well. The market is frozen with sellers unwilling to sell and buyers unwilling to buy. Like everyone is waiting for the other person to budge. Well, we'll see. The upside of a frozen market is stability. No bubble busting, no crazy bid wars. The downside is it can feel a bit stagnant and it doesn't really solve the affordability problem for new buyers. So, here's a question for you. Which scenario do you think is most likely to happen? A crash, a boom, or frozen? Drop a comment below with your prediction. Alright, so what do the experts and data actually forecast for 2025 housing market? Let's pick out what banks, economists, and real estate analysts are predicting for the housing market in 2025. Starting with the United States, the general consensus is no crash, but no crazy boom either, more of a slow grind upwards. For example, Fannie Mae, a major U.S. housing finance entity, predicts home prices will increase about 3 to 5% in 2025. The Mortgage Bankers Association is a bit more cautious, expecting roughly plus 1.3% by the end of 2025. And the National Association of Realtors forecasts about a 2% rise in the median house prices in 2025. These are small increases, basically keeping up with or just above inflation, and almost no one is forecasting a big price drop drastically. In the UK, expert predictions also point to a modest rise or stable prices in 2025 rather than a crash. Zoplan Housing Index expects an average UK house price to rise about 2.5% in 2025. Savills, a big real estate firm, likewise forecasts roughly a 4% increase in 2025 for UK house values. The Homeowners Alliance report that experts predict between 2 to 4% growth for the year. And remember, this comes after a year where prices surprised analysts by rising a few percent despite predictions of a fall. So UK analysts are cautiously optimistic. They are not expecting a major drop, partly because while interest rates have cooled down drastically, there are still underlying demand from people who need housing, and unemployment is pretty low. To sum up the experts' outlook, frozen or a gentle growth might seem to be the expectation, not a dramatic crash, not a dramatic boom. So, if you're hoping for prices to plunge, most data says probably not. If you're fearing an uncontrollable boom, also probably not. We are likely in a bit of middle of the road here in housing. Now, forecasts can be wrong. They often are, but it's useful to know what the pros are thinking so you can plan. Speaking of planning, let's talk about what all this means for you if you're in the market or maybe on the sidelines. Everyone's situation is different, but here are some practical tips for various folks in 2025. If you're a first-time home buyer or planning to buy your first house, the 2025 market is challenging but can be maneuvered. Don't count on huge housing market crashes to magically make home affordable. Instead, focus on what you can control. Get your finances in order, save up for a down payment, improve your credit scores, and get pre-approved for a mortgage so you know how much you can afford. With the market likely to stay flat or slowly rising, waiting might not net you a cheaper price. But if current prices and rates are too high for you, it's okay to take your time. Keep an eye on the mortgage rate. If they start to dip later in 2025, that could slightly improve what you qualify for. Also, be ready to act when you find a home you love. In a mostly frozen market, the good houses, the ones priced right and in nice conditions, can still attract competition. So if you do find your dream home and you can afford the monthly payment, it might make sense to go for it. Even if interest rate is higher than you'd like, you can always refinance to a lower rate in a couple of years if rates come down. But if buying would stretch you to the breaking point, it's better to wait and look for a more affordable home or area. Finally, shop around and negotiate. In a cooler market, sellers may be more willing to negotiate on prices or pay for closing costs or repairs. Don't be afraid to make an offer a bit below the asking price if the home has been on the market for a while. This isn't 2021. Buyers have more leverage. And if you're a homeowner thinking of selling, price realistically and be patient. In most areas, 2025 is not a raging seller's market, but well-priced houses do sell. Work with a good agent, consider renovating your property, and be open to offers and negotiations. If you don't have to move this year, you are in a decent spot to just sit tight and build equity slowly as prices inches up. But if you need to sell, don't panic. Just understand it might take a bit longer to find the right buyer in a slower market. You might not get 10 bidders on one day, but you will get there. And if you're a renter hoping to buy eventually or not, the 2025 housing market affects you too. Rents in many places went up a lot in recent years. If the housing market stays frozen, some frustrated buyers will remain renters for a longer time, which means rents will keep going up. On the other hand, if rental homes hit the market, we might see rent growth slow down. As a renter, keep an eye on local rent trends. It might be worth negotiating with your landlord or locking in a longer lease if you can to protect yourself against potential rent hikes. No matter who you are, the key takeaway is plan for multiple scenarios. The best time to buy or invest is when you are financially ready and find a good deal that fits your need. 2025 might require patience and homework, but it's also a time of less frenzy, which can be a good thing for thoughtful decision making. As the saying goes, don't wait to buy real estate and wait, but only when it makes sense for your situation. Are you a buyer, seller, investor, or renter? What's your biggest challenge or worry about 2025 housing market? Let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective or any tips you have for others. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps out the channel a lot. And as a thank you, I promise to keep uploading quality videos every Wednesdays and Sundays where I break down money, financial markets, and how to protect your wealth, regardless of what the economy throws at you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.